Hello. Welcome to church, done a new way, an old way, a way that we haven't done in a little while. Uh, Wherever you are, I'm hoping that you're in your own home, on your couch, at your dining table, on a computer, however it is that you're watching along today. Welcome. We're on YouTube today. We're on Facebook today. I'm going to encourage you to bring your comments into the chat as we go along. But I just wanted to say hello. I wanted to say welcome. I wanted to say, how you doing? How is the first day of hopefully only a 5-day lockdown treating you? Well, because it is day one of a 5-day lockdown and we're doing church a little bit differently, a little bit how we used to do church, I wanted to bring to your attention these announcements that we've got just here. Um, if you've got your phone with you, just scan that QR code that was just there, that's now gone. But we're going to bring back Connect Your Meal. So this Monday from 12:30 p.m. for lunch, and then next Thursday, even though we're out of lockdown by Thursday, 6:30 p.m. We'll gather together then, just in case we're still in lockdown, just in case we're still a bit uncertain around going out of the house. The rules are simple: just log into Zoom. Whether you've got a meal or not, just log into Zoom. There's going to be people there that are going to love to see you and stalk what you're eating, and we can plan our own meals after that. But if you do have your phone with you, scan this QR code to connect with us. That will take you to our digital connect card. You can fill out your details there and let us know if there's anything that you need or want to be known by our team here in the upper room. Well, I would like to know who is watching. I can see that we've got a few people on YouTube, a few people on Facebook. So if you have the ability, just get into that comment section and tell us where you are watching from. That would be really, really handy today. What I would love to do as well is to say, whatever you've done so far for today, I want to encourage you that after our service today, after our church sermon today, we will be having our Bible study groups for teens and adults. If you would like to join one of those, but don't yet have the details, if you've got a text for me, if you've got a phone number for me, you can send me a text and I'll send you that link directly, or you can comment on our Instagram or Facebook pages and send a DM there and we'll send those through to you. Today, for church today, we would like to also encourage you to contribute your tithes and offerings using our giving on our website. So go to our website, www.masdac.org.au/giving, or if you just go to masdac.org.au, there's a button there that says giving. That will take you to an option to contribute your tithe and offering for us today. I can't be certain what our offering is for now. The reason is that ordinarily today was going to be an offering for ADRA projects, but because it is Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year time, we'd done a little bit of a rearrangement. It was going to be local church budget. So our offering was meant to be for ADRA. We'd swapped it to local church budget in order to I suppose capitalize on Lunar New Year celebrations, Chinese New Year celebrations. But of course, we're now not at church to capitalize on that. But I still think that the offering is for our local church budget. So wherever you are, however you want to contribute, I would encourage you to get onto that giving website and contribute your tithes and offerings there. You can set it up as an automatic giving right throughout the week, so you don't have to remember it every Sabbath. You can get it to happen just automatically, or you can do it each time if that's how you so choose. I see that we have got Jenny here saying hi, Josh, on Facebook. Hello to you, Jenny. I'm assuming you've got your family there with you. Likewise with Sonia. Hello to the Chuangs. You've sent through some little pictures of what you and your family have been up to already on our WhatsApp group. And then we've got the Lees. Hi, Vic, also there on Facebook. So just one more reminder, if you want to head to scan that QR code and connect with us, there is an opportunity in that Connect card to add your phone number in and be joined to our WhatsApp groups so that you can always keep up to date with what's happening within the upper room. I do have to bring up one more comment also from Facebook. Hi from the other room. Hi, wife from the other room, just to be a little bit funny. You're literally a wall and a doorway away from me. What I would also love to encourage you to do is, as you hopefully have been already, I sent out a video yesterday encouraging you to connect with one person, at least one person each day, just to send a text message, send a Facebook message, a phone call, a FaceTime, whatever that is, to one person each day of our 5-day lockdown. My challenge, though, is for it to be one different person each day. And then we're going to try and see how we went about that when we gather together at church next week. Hopefully, we're at church next week. But again, if you are on Facebook or YouTube, pop a comment in. And once we get into our topic for today, you'll have the opportunity to contribute to the conversation as well. We've got a few more people that have come in on both Facebook and YouTube. So welcome to all of our new viewers. Before we get started with opening up the Bible and having a little bit of time there, I would ask you, wherever you are, just to bow your head, we're going to pray. So if you're unfamiliar with what prayer is about, it's just a time where we spend time talking to God, and out of a sign of respect for God and who he is, we tend to just close our eyes and bow our heads. So wherever you are, I just encourage you to do the same as I open with a word of prayer for today. Father in heaven, we are grateful that even in the craziness of life, when we thought COVID-19, the year of 2020 was behind us with that craziness, we're grateful that we still have the ability to connect through the internet, through technology, through the phones that we have in our hands, that we can still be able to connect with each other. But more importantly, that just through saying a prayer, we can also connect with you. And today, as we open up your word and look at some of the teaching that you have for us in the Bible, I pray that you will be with each and every person who is listening along, who is watching along. Give them an outpouring of your blessing and your spirit. I pray for encouragement for those who are just anxious for having to go through even this 5-day lockdown again. There may be some that are watching from areas of Victoria that haven't had to experience lockdown in this capacity before. So I just pray that you give them some comfort and some certainty that they will be kept safe over these next 5 days. I just want to thank you for the opportunity we've had to contribute our tithes and offerings. And I just pray that you'll use those funds to do your work in the most powerful way. As we gather together as the upper room today, I pray that you will keep at the forefront of our minds the challenge that you have put on our hearts as a congregation for this year, and that is to be able to get used to different. May you continually challenge us to push the boundaries of what we're used to and step into the uncomfortable, the places that you are calling us to, so that we might be able to share your gospel and your everlasting salvation with those that we come into contact with. I pray in your name. Amen. All right. So again, if you are watching along on Facebook or on YouTube, you can type a comment, a question into your comment section if it is interestingly enough. If it's interesting enough, if it piques my interest, we'll get it up on the screen, especially as it relates to the topic that we're going to look at today. And the topic we're looking at today is titled Bridges and Walls. So what does bridges and walls mean? Well, hopefully you'll find out shortly. Maybe to start off, if you can pop in your comments, what do you think we mean just by the topic of bridges and walls? What do you think we might be talking about today? I want to challenge you with that. I'm trying to bring many things up, but doing it all by myself. So you're going to see me pause for a moment and pretend like I know what I'm doing when I've got half a clue of what I'm doing. That's not the one that I wanted, but that's okay. I might be breaking my own computer here. Do that. Bridges and walls. What are your comments? What do you think we're talking about in relation to bridges and walls. There we go. We've got something from Grace. Hello, Grace. Thank you for tuning in. Separation. In a roundabout way, that is correct. Perhaps you actually have the same thought um, or idea of what we're heading towards. You just might say it a little bit differently or succinctly to me. I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher, so I tend to talk on, rabbit on, and I tend to make something that should be simple quite complex, it would seem. Hurdles in life, says Sodya. Uh, in a roundabout way again, hurdles in life, but probably not as directly as you might like to think. Now, one of the things that really does pique my interest, and one of the things that really I find quite entertaining. There's a show that used to be on the ABC called the Gruen Transfer. So if you are familiar with that show, um, you will know that what they do essentially is analyze advertisements. So they look at different kind of ads and marketing techniques, and they analyze them, they pick them to pieces and show you why they're successful or why they're unsuccessful. And there are some ads that really just stick with me that I've watched throughout the years, and I'm sure you have a few too. There's a couple that really come to mind. One of them is the Yellow Pages ad. Not Happy Jan. It was probably the late 80s or early 90s that first came out, and then they reinvented it a couple of times. And we get that in Australian vernacular now when we're unimpressed with something. We're not happy, Jan. And that's one of the ads that sticks with me. The other one is the one that's really going to introduce our idea of bridges and walls, of which Jenny says is bridges are things that connect while walls are things that obstruct. And that pretty much is where we're headed today. So Jenny, you've probably brought together everything that has been said thus far. Bridges and walls, bridges connect, walls obstruct. And so the ad that really I wanted to focus on today, and I want to encourage you, if you're watching along, I'm going to challenge you, you're going to pop your answer into the comment section of whatever forum or medium that you're watching on to tell me what this ad was advertising, but you're not allowed to use Google to find out. So you just have to use your memory. The ad was a dad driving along in his car, and he's just driving along as you do. And then all of a sudden, you hear the son of this father in the back seat. And the son just kind of looks up from the book that he's reading and he says, "Dad, why did they build the Great Wall of China?" And the dad there, thinking for a moment, not sure why they built the Great Wall of China, comes up with this idea in his mind. He's like, I can see him thinking, like, this is what I think he's thinking. It's like, well, the son's just asked me a question. I'm not sure of the answer. I've got to come up with an answer for him. I've got to show him that I'm the dad and I know all of the answers. And the dad comes up with his answer and he says, "Well, son, it was during the reign of Emperor Nazi Goring that they built the Great Wall of China. And rabbits, they built the Great Wall of China because there's a lot of rabbits in China, and it was to keep the rabbits out." And then we have a cut scene, and we go to little Johnny, the son that was in the back seat, and he's standing at the front of his school classroom, and you hear the teacher say, "And now Johnny is going to give us his report on the Great Wall of China." And you can just imagine Johnny's report on the Great Wall of China saying, "Well, the Great Wall of China was built," and telling his whole class because of Emperor Nazi Goring to keep the rabbits out. Um, and what this goes to tell us is that there is really a purpose for walls. And the correct answer as to what this was actually advertising is Telstra, Victor. You are correct. It was Telstra's broadband internet. Just as we were, I think, moving out of dial-up internet into broadband internet. So Telstra advert was what this one was about, and it was to keep the rabbits out. But it shows that walls essentially are made to accomplish one of two things. The first thing that walls are built to achieve and to accomplish is to either keep people out of something or to keep people in something. That's really the most simplistic explanation of what a wall is for. In relation to a bridge, however, a bridge also is created to achieve one of two things, and that is either to be an avenue to send people out of somewhere or an avenue to bring people in to somewhere. So ultimately, bridges are there to create links between two locations. Their purpose is to provide a connection, whereas a wall's purpose is to provide disconnection, to provide barriers. And I want to challenge us throughout the course of our time together today as a church, as Christians, when it comes to your spiritual life, when it comes to our spiritual life as a congregation, are we in the bridge building business or are we in the wall building business? The Bible has a text that I want to spend a moment reading. So if you have your Bible with you, I'd encourage you to grab it out. If you're watching along on a phone, probably it'd be a bit difficult to change apps and do all that kind of thing. So a hard copy Bible would come in really handy about now. I don't have the text coming up on the screen today, so I'll just read this as it comes. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 through 23. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 through 23. Though I am free and belong to no one. Now, before I continue on, for those who are unaware, First Corinthians is one of the books written by the Apostle Paul. It's called First Corinthians because there's one called Second Corinthians, and it was a letter that Paul wrote to the church in Corinth. It wasn't just a specific church, but generally the Christian community that was meeting in the town or the city of Corinth. And chapter 9, they weren't letters that were written with chapters and verses. We've popped those in later just so we can find them as easy reference. But it is a letter to the Corinthians that Paul wrote in the first century. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those as not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its many blessings. Now, this text is interesting for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons that we often overlook as to why it's interesting is because it doesn't tell us so much about the church in Corinth as much as it does. It tells us a lot about the author itself, Paul. Now, for those who are, again, unaware, and that may be you today, Paul used to be known as Saul. And he was a Pharisee, one of the religious elite, one of the rulers of the religious people at the time. And he was such a part of this religious elite that this religious elite, who were Jewish by heritage, despised and hated those who followed the way of Jesus, the Christians in the early church in the first century. And Paul/Saul and the Pharisees would go around persecuting, locking up, and killing the Christians. Yet here is Paul writing a letter to the Christians because Paul has had a conversion experience. He's come to know Jesus himself. But having grown up as a Jew, there's very much an ingrained understanding that we are under the law. And Paul here is saying, I am no longer under the law. For a Jew, for a rabbi, for a Pharisee to say, I am no longer under the law is such a massive experience. It's such a massive thing for them to get to the point to write that down, to say that. And so Paul is telling us a lot about the conversion experience in his life at this point in time. I'm no longer under the law. I am under the law of Christ. I'm not under the law of the Old Testament. I'm not under the law that the rabbis, that the Pharisees would have you believe exists. I'm under the law that comes because of Christ. And because of that, I have become like these people. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. And what we find is that in our day and age today, Christians, Adventists, you yourself may have experienced this. We tend to not even become like someone for fear that we might become someone. Paul here did not say, I became a Jew to win the Jews. I became weak to win the weak. I became a Gentile to win the Gentiles. He said, I came alongside them. I understood their experience. I knew the language that they spoke, and I spoke into their lives because I lived that life with them. I didn't become them, but I became like them. In Christianity today, within my church experience, within Adventism generally, a challenge that we face is that far too often we don't want to become like anyone for fear that they may taint our Christianity, they may taint our religiosity. We are so far removed at times from the culture of the world that we find ourselves in that we can't actually minister to the people who live in the world with us. Now, many years ago now, it's 8 years ago. Many of you know this story. I went to New York as a missionary. Um, and in order to go to New York as a missionary, um, the requirement was I had to complete a project called the Passport to Mission. And the Passport to Mission was essentially, if I can remember correctly, about 500 pages of reading and some notes and assignments and things that we had to do in order to acclimatize ourselves to the culture of North America. Now, me coming from Victoria, from Ballarat originally, from Melbourne now, going from Melbourne to New York, you wouldn't think would be too much of a culture shock. Now, you would think wrongly it was much more of a culture shock than I would have believed it to be. But the preparation for me to even go on that mission trip, and gratefully so, was to do this reading, to really think through the cultural differences, to prepare myself for the culture that I was going into, to understand the language that they speak, to understand the way and the rhythm in which they live their lives so that I can best minister to that culture and those rhythms. I had to do that in order to be a missionary in New York. Far too often in life today, we will expect people, or we will send people out to be missionaries in our own communities without having done the research to understand the communities that we're ministering in. Now, each and every one of us, we have many communities that we're a part of. We're part of a church community, perhaps. We're part of a school community, maybe, a work community, a sporting community, a mums group, a kinder community. You name it. There are many communities that we're a part of. And we can fairly easily insert ourselves into any of those communities. But we really find it challenging when those communities come together, when they cross over. And we're not sure how to act because if we're honest with ourselves, we sometimes have this different personality for these different communities. When we want to take our church community, our God community, our faith community, and expand that and tell people about Jesus, sometimes we struggle because we're not sure how to have that part of ourselves exposed to that other part of ourselves and really speak into the culture because oftentimes that's not the way we would speak in that situation. I speak a certain way at church and I might speak a certain way at soccer, whatever that is for you. And I want to challenge you that if that's you today, you're not alone. Unfortunately, we as church leaders, we as church leaders have conditioned you that way. We have told you, maybe not directly, but indirectly, that we have expectations of you at church. And you'll live up to those, even though you don't necessarily live up to those or have those same expectations in any other area of your life. And I want to challenge you to be an authentic Christian, to be your authentic self, to be able to minister best to these communities. So, how does one become a bridge builder then? Coming back to our topic of bridges and walls, how does one become a bridge builder for Christ? While it's true that we need to understand theology, while it's true that we need to understand the gospel message, we also need to understand what non Christians believe, how non Christians speak, how they think, how they're impacted by today's culture. And then, as ambassadors for Christ, we can become the bridge between the church and the world by communicating the gospel into the context of a non Christian mindset. We can speak the language of the non Christian. You will recall, if you've been a student of the Bible for any length of time, that Paul was taken into a city and there was a statue there, a monument made to the unknown God. And Paul, who knew much about this culture, was able to turn around and say, "You've got this monument here, you've got this statue here to the unknown God. Well, you don't know that God, but I do. Let me tell you about the God that you don't know." And he was able to introduce them to Jesus. Perhaps you have friends, perhaps you have people in your life that are waiting to hear about a God unknown to them, but no one has been able to translate the language of Christians into the language of everyday Australians to be able to tell them about the God that is unknown to them, but the God that loves them nonetheless. As Christians, we have built walls to make this a difficult, not an impossible, but a difficult task. In fact, if we're honest with ourselves, at times we've even built walls amongst our own people. As Adventists, we've built walls amongst our own people. Now, again, if you're in the comments at any stage today, pop something in there. Sorry, I wasn't meaning to bring that one back up again, Vic. That was just me not handling my hands correctly and smacking the keyboard. I want to challenge you today. I want to encourage you today to pop something in the comments here, um, especially if you have seen the film Tell the World. So if you have seen the film Tell the World, just say yes, pop a thumbs up, whatever it is in the comments section there. I want to see how many of you have seen this film or even heard of this film. It's not something that was released by Hollywood, but it's a very specific and particular film. So if you have seen or know of the film Tell the World, let me know that you know of this film. So Tell the World was released about 6 years ago. And what it does, Grace, is that a no, you haven't seen it, or no, you haven't heard of it? Well, if you haven't heard of it, then I'm going to tell you about it. So Tell the World is the dramatic retelling, if I can, of the early Adventist church. It was released formally at the General Conference session in San Antonio in 2015. It was produced, if memory serves me correctly, by the Australian Union Conference, and then the rights were purchased by the General Conference because we all have those ownership issues. There's a wall, ownership issues within even the church. But Tell the World tells the early Adventist history. It tells from about 1840. I've actually not seen the film myself. I've read the synopsis and I've read the history, but I haven't seen the film. It tells the early Adventist history from about 1840-ish through till the establishment of the Adventist Church in 1863. It's an inspiring film about overcoming adversity and the challenges of these young people at the time, really challenging the status quo and studying their Bibles diligently to come to this new and fresh understanding from which our denomination now exists. But I want to tell you, as much as you may have enjoyed that film if you've watched it, I doubt you will ever see a sequel to the film Tell the World. And the reason is, even though we now, from 1863 to 2021, have 160 years of extra history to add to that as a sequel, we're not going to see it because the years immediately after the establishment of the Adventist Church, they were not as an inspiring time. We come to the end of the 1880s, and Alan White, one of the founders of the Adventist Church, was becoming a little bit too um, annoying, if I can use that term, for the General Conference officers and those in charge of the church. So they decided to send her as a missionary to this far-flung place called Australia. Now, in the 1880s, a woman of her age, Ellen White's age, being of about 65 years of age, sending her to the other side of the world in Australia was essentially a death sentence. It was, let's just ship her off so she's on the other side of the world and won't be as much of a pain. Now, Ellen White, being the resilient, not quite young lady that she was at that time, managed to live right through until 1915. So she sure showed them. We also had the challenge of the 1888 General Conference session, which was a very divisive session. We had the 1915 Bible Conference, whose records were actually sealed for about 50 years. If you want more history on that, check out the Adventist History podcast by Matt Lucio. We also had the whole saga with the Kellogg's and their kind of love-hate relationship with Adventism and health food. It wasn't particularly an inspiring time immediately after the 1863 establishment of the Adventist Church. But it was a film that showed us what is possible when you start to build bridges rather than walls. And so I want to challenge you where you are today. If you feel comfortable, you can pop answers to these in the comments. But these questions that I'm going to ask you are more for your self reflection. What are some of the walls of Adventism? If you're not an Adventist, what are some of the walls of Christianity? If you're not a Christian, you can answer it in another way. What are some of the walls that Christians have put up that don't necessarily need to be walls? What are some of the barriers that we've put in place that don't need to be there? Then I want you to think a bit more positively. What are some of the bridges that Christianity has put in place that have been really exciting, that have been really meaningful, that have been really encouraging for you? Now, this time I'm going to be speaking directly to those who attend the upper room. Perhaps don't pop these in the comments. You can send these ones directly to me if you would like, because I think there's some great discussion that we can have out of this. What are some of the walls that we, as a local church, have broken down? So we're going to celebrate. What are some of the walls that we as a local church have broken down? Because the reality is, some of the walls that Christianity has built, that our ancestors have built, they need to be broken down. They may have been walls that served a purpose for a time, but perhaps that purpose is no longer necessary and those walls need to be taken away. So, what are some of the walls as a local church that we have broken down? But again, what are some of the walls that we still need to break down? What are some of those barriers that still need to be broken down? And then when we talk about bridges, as a local church, people from the upper room, what are some of the bridges that we have built? Let's celebrate those. But again, what are some additional bridges that we need to build? If you're watching along today and you're not a regular person who attends the upper room, if you're not familiar with our congregation, that's okay. We're grateful that you're watching regardless. In fact, what I would love to know, if you are even vaguely familiar with the upper room, if you're not, that's fine. If you're not familiar with us, maybe you're vaguely familiar with Christians in general. I want you to think about and maybe send in a DM to our Facebook, Instagram, whatever communication method you want. There's no DMs on YouTube, is there? I want you to tell me, what are some of the bridges that Christianity, that the upper room needs to build if you're not a regular member of our community? What is something that perhaps is holding you back from calling the upper room or Christianity part of your identity? Jesus was in the business of building bridges and of tearing walls down. What is it that has made us as Christians at times in the business of building walls and tearing bridges down? There's three Bible texts that I want to finish on as we end our time together today. Three Bible texts. The first one is in the book of Mark, chapter 5, verses 18 to verse 19. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people. Tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." One of the things that I think is really intriguing and encouraging in this text is that in church life, we can often expect people to be rightly trained. They've done Bible studies for a year or two, and then we will send them out to tell people about Jesus. But Jesus here, after healing this man, after healing him of demon possession, he says, "You're not needing to come with me to be a fangirl of any sort. I want you to go and be an evangelist. I want you to go and tell people of the experience that you've had of knowing Jesus." And so I want to encourage you, wherever you are, if you have experienced Jesus in your life, you are rightly trained enough to tell someone about him. Tell them about the story of the encounter that you have had with Jesus. John 15:12 tells us that my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Jesus' disciples were far, far from perfect, and yet Jesus loved them. Judas was the disciple that he knew would betray him, yet he called him as a disciple anyway. He loved him anyway. There are people in your life that perhaps are not behaving in the way that you would like them to, that are not as close to Jesus as perhaps you might like them to be. I want to encourage you to love them anyway. Whatever choice they make, love them. Love them, because it is Jesus' command to love each other just like he has loved us. And then again in John 14, verse 6, Jesus answered, I am the way and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If there's nothing else you hear today, as much as the topic is bridges and walls, the one thing that I want to encourage you with is to seek Jesus. Because when you seek Jesus, you will naturally become a bridge builder. You will be used as a link from your current circumstance to the community that he's calling you to. So I want to encourage you to get to know Jesus, to be a bridge builder, not a wall builder. As we wrap up today, I want to use this opportunity in the comments section of our YouTube channel. And I know that there's currently 8 of you on YouTube, and 11 of you on Facebook. I want to encourage you to affirm the bridge builders that you're aware of in our community. They may not like this, but I'm going to get you to do it anyway. I want you to just type the name of a bridge builder, someone who has been an example of a true disciple of Christ that loves people, someone who has encouraged you, perhaps has built a bridge to you, and that's the reason that you're still calling yourself a Christian today. I want to spend just a moment reflecting on those bridge builders. I'm not going to pop those comments up on the screen. This is just for you to publicly affirm someone who has been a bridge builder, someone that you look up to, someone that you admire, someone that has taught you how to build bridges in your communities that you find yourselves in. Could be your mum, could be your dad, your sister, an uncle, could be a random person that no one else knows, and that's perfectly fine. These people are important to you, and they're important to Jesus as well. So let's just spend a moment thinking about those bridge builders, because in the end, we're all called to be bridge builders, to build links through to the communities that we live, work, and play in. And as you're thinking about that, perhaps not sure whether you should pop that name into the comments, I'm just going to close our time together with a word of prayer. And once we're finished today, you're going to see a couple of slides pop back up on the screen with your announcements of what we're encouraging you to do over the course of the next week, especially today. But let's just bow our heads and have a word of prayer as we wrap up our time together today. Father in heaven, you have called each and every one of us to be sons and daughters of yours. You've called us to tell people the great news that comes when we experience you as our Lord and Savior. You've called us to be bridge builders, to speak into the communities that we live and work in. But too often, if we're honest with ourselves, we either personally have been part of building walls that have been barriers to sharing your good news, or we've done it as a congregation or as a denomination or as a worldwide Christian church. And Lord, I just want to pray for forgiveness for those times that we've been part and parcel of the wall building business. Lord, I want to pray that you encourage us, that you impress upon us the walls that we need to tear down and the bridges that we need to build. There's been people today that have been watching along that have shared who some of those bridge builders, those examples have been for them. And I just want to affirm each and every person whose name has been typed into those comments or has been thought of today as we've been sharing this time together. May you give us the impetus to reach out and personally affirm these people as well. And from that, may we be able to draw closer as a community and draw closer to each other and to you as we build bridges to spread the everlasting gospel even further, I pray, in your name. Amen. So just a reminder, at 4 o'clock today, we will have our teen and adult Bible study groups on Zoom. So if you would like to join those, you will need a link, a Zoom link. So send a DM to our Facebook or our Instagram, or the details are all there on WhatsApp if you're already on WhatsApp. But just for the next few minutes, I'm just going to pop these announcements back up on the screen so that people who have perhaps come in a bit later can know what we're up to with Connect Your Meal or fill out our Connect card. But for now, be blessed, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you in one of our Bible study groups in just a little under an hour.